this guy, Dan Friedberg. Now, Dan's past is very important because he used to work for UltimateBet, a poker site which got in a lot of trouble and has a very shady past for reasons we've explained before.
UltimateBet got in trouble because they were giving some of their players a God mode that allowed them to see the other players' cards, which would obviously be an advantage if you're trying to play poker.
Wow. So Friedberg was working for UltimateBet during these God mode days. And although he was never charged with anything, there is leaked audio coming out from him conspiring to hide the owner of UltimateBet from facing any consequences from using it. Here's Russ Hamilton, the former owner of UltimateBet, who used God mode and admits to making money with it, telling Friedberg that he wants to get out of this cheating scandal.
I feel, and I did take this money, and I'm not trying to make it right, Dan, so we got to get that out of the way real quick, okay?
So then Dan Friedberg replies to Russ that maybe they should just blame it all on a third-party consultant and say that was who used the God mode on their website instead of Russ himself.
I think for the public, it just has to be former consultant to the company, took advantage of a server flaw by hacking in the client, been able to identify exactly when sometimes he played with it, sometimes he played without it. Sometimes he intentionally won and sometimes he intentionally lost. Very erratic play. But we've been able to identify the times when the tool was up and their net wins. And that's what it is.
And what you could also say is that the tool was originally set for a 15-minute delay,
And he hacked
it to a real time.
I think that's what we do.
So this is the guy they hired at FTX as their chief regulatory officer, a guy who once conspired to hide his cheating boss. And of course, there are more red flags about the relationship between FTX and Alameda. You might assume that, like, okay, if it was negligence, maybe everyone inside the organization was just sharing information with everyone. There was no walls in place, right? And that's what created the conflicts of interest. But that doesn't match with what we've heard. I personally have spoken to FTX insiders who said they were blindsided by the collapse. They didn't know anything. The Wall Street Journal also reports that FTX employees were completely in the dark, which corroborates that. So FTX employees had no idea what was going on at Alameda. Meanwhile, the Alameda employees, on the other hand, knew exactly what was going on at FTX. They had back-end access. So this relationship wasn't uncontrolled, it was one-sided. Back to the God mode analogy, it was almost as if they specifically set up their crypto exchange to be pilfered by their traders without anyone knowing. Almost like they had a back door. Oh yeah, they did end up building a back door. I forgot, their CTO built a back door to avoid triggering red flags. See, it's hard to call things like this accidents or negligence. It's literally designed to be hidden. Alameda had a one-way window into FTX to steal whatever they wanted from client funds, and I do mean steal, not misappropriate, not negligently lose, steal. But unbelievably, the way it's quoted in like the New York Times, you'd think this was some kind of loan they took out, a margin position it's called. But we know now it wasn't a margin position. Alameda apparently had a secret exemption from certain aspects of FTX.com's auto liquidation protocol, according to their new CEO. So this large margin position isn't a margin position at all because they could never be liquidated. And I'm sure Dan Friedberg might be somewhere on a call trying to figure out how to blame a rogue employee on this secret exemption. But let's be honest with ourselves. Alameda knew what they were doing was criminal. That's why they call it a secret exemption. And they were even willing to lie about it to keep it a secret. Alameda CEO, Caroline Ellison, denied special access to Bloomberg News, saying, "We definitely have a Chinese wall in terms of information sharing to ensure that no one at Alameda would get customer information from FTX or any sort of special treatment from FTX." But obviously, this was a lie. Here's Sam Bankman-Fried lying too. Quote, "Alameda is a wholly separate entity." Well, we know that isn't true either. Looking back, it was obvious because even when you'd wire them money to FTX, the international wiring instructions were to Alameda Research. Not exactly separate. And so after finding all of this out, I spoke to Mark Cohodes, who called out SBF as a fraud much earlier than almost anyone else. And I asked him his thoughts, and he said, this was all obvious a mile away.
I knew something was wrong a year ago because everything this guy said, and you can play all his interviews back, nothing added up. Nothing added up. If people ask me a question, I will give them an answer or say, I don't know. I won't talk in a figure eight. I won't answer a question with a non-answer again and again and again. Nothing this guy said has ever made a lick of sense. And if he would have come to my office looking for money, I would have told him to hit the bricks because nothing added. I mean, they didn't even figure out that his accountant's address was somewhere in the metaverse. I mean, at a minimum, you check out who the guy's auditor is and say, who's your auditor? Oh, my auditor's name is the Pep Boy, Manny, Mo, and Jack. Okay, what's his address? Somewhere in the metaverse. Is this a joke? No, I'm being serious.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely that can't be true that the auditor of FTX was located in the metaverse. But checking their official bankruptcy filings, that is the case. And now, because no one looked into it, FTX owes $3.1 billion to its top 50 creditors alone. And I guess if they have complaints, they can go to the metaverse and ask about it. I'm just kidding. Well, kind of. I actually don't think they probably take complaints in the metaverse. Either way, the question of was Sam Bankman-Fried a fraud is not much of a question at all. The real question is, why did so few people catch on early, and why didn't the media catch on sooner? I'm not sure. We can speculate. Maybe it was because of political donations or this whole story about effective altruism. But ultimately, what I know for sure is that people like Mark Cohodes, they weren't silent. He says he took it to journalists before the crash to see if they'd do anything, and they said no.
I went to Bloomberg with my pal who I was working on this thing with, and we laid it out to five ladies on the crypto team, and they passed, and they said it would be too much work, we'd lose access, it's bad for business, right? They'd hang up on us if we asked these questions. Well, at least I had the questions.
Wait, Bloomberg denied a story with you because they thought it would lose them access and it was too much work?
Yes, 100%.
When did this happen?
This happened in July. This happened in early July. They had everything.
Wow.
They also said, but I didn't want anyone fired. So I didn't give them this. They said it was bad for business, i.e. advertising.
You're kidding. So they admit their conflict of interest with advertisers in the crypto space.
Yes.
Now, this is pretty shocking allegations, so I did want to reach out to Bloomberg for comment to see if they wanted to respond to this, and here's what they said.